one of the few crossover nations in the game, Shaman King nowadays plays second fiddle to Monster Strike. At least this one's remembered. The nation features playstyles based off of characters from the hit Shonen Jump series Shaman King. Several of these ride lines utilize a mechanic known as Oversoul, based off the same one from the series. In the case of Vanguard, Oversoul activates by sending a specifically named card from Rearguard Circle to your grade 3. These named cards are spirits that have no physical form. As such, they've got 0 critical. On release, the collab was actually pretty good, and saw some tops during its prime. It also helped that it had a second set to support the first one. Yo Asakura, the main protagonist, utilizes an aggro-heavy rush playstyle with a powered-up front line. His ride line is extremely straightforward. Grade 1 lets you call Amidamaru, Yo's Oversoul unit, to your center back row. Grade 2 takes advantage of that with a free draw and plus 5k power on Counterblast. And fighting together Yo Asakura can take an Amidamaru for his Oversoul ability. Core cards for this deck include Enter the Ultra Pompadour Wooden Sword Ryu, a grade 2 who can threaten itself to restand should any of his teammates land a hit against the opponent's Vanguard. I'll sacrifice these legs for her sake Faust the 7th, a supportive grade 2 who can call any of your key cards back from the drop zone. Spirit of Sword Asakura Yo, your main grade 3, who will come in with 23k and double crit upon ride. Legendary Samurai Amidamaru is the most important card in your deck. It allows your Asakura Yo to utilize his Oversoul ability. And finally, but not least, Goddess of Victory Ana Kyoyama, easily the other most important card in your deck. It's what allows your Spirit of Sword to easily double attack, as your opponent will most likely guard on your first one. The Yo Asakura deck is quite easy to pick up and play. Like most rush decks, the goal is to damage your opponent as quickly as possible. If not, then have your opponent guard as much as possible early on, so they don't take as much damage later. Due to Spirit of Sword's instant double crit, your second grade 3 ride is generally your most optimal turn. Like most rush decks, grade 2 rushing is absolutely viable across all matchups. Stubborn Bandit Tokagero can be used to power up any of your Ryu units to reach 24k power. Amidamaru is also a powerful booster even without Oversoul. Your grade 2 Yo can easily reach 23,000. Then, with Yo's skill, that becomes 28,000 with a free draw. This is an easy +1. Then, when we ride on our first grade 3, we can already go for the kill. I know I said the win con is on second ride, but you can still push for lethal here. It's all thanks to fighting together Yo Asakura's skill. By placing Amidamaru into the soul for Oversoul, you draw and the entire front row gains 5,000 power. I've already mentioned that your units can easily reach past 25,000. Now it's nearly guaranteed to reach 30,000. And that's not all. If you're at 4 damage, Yo can even gain the double crit when he attacks. This is where Ana comes into play. If you have her out, you're forcing your opponent to either guard or be willing to take 2 damage right then and there. Before, I also mentioned that Ultra Pomp Ryu can restand if any of your teammates land a hit. You generally attack with him first, then Yo. Due to the threats of restand regardless of if you hit or not, your opponent needs to decide what's more worth guarding. No matter what happens, it's most likely you'll get 4 attacks on average. If you're able to Oversoul on the next grade 3, your entire front row will have plus 10,000 power. Yo will have an additional 10,000 on top of that thanks to his on-ride ability. A 33,000 Yo with double crit that can restand if it's blocked is a very scary sight. All in all, not a bad performance. Pretty good, right? Unfortunately, there's a reason this deck isn't winning in popularity. On paper, the offense is relatively solid, but where it falls hard is everything else. The deck is extremely piece reliant. You need Amidamaru to trigger Oversoul. Without it, you're never reaching those high power columns. It also hurts that you have a real possibility of damage checking one as well. While it's true that you're guaranteed him on grade 1, that doesn't necessarily mean you're good to go. For one, you're going to use him eventually whether that's your first grade 3 or second. There's also the chance it could get retired by your opponent before you even get a chance to use it. Having only 4 copies of him with only 1 card capable of searching him doesn't make him the most consistent strategy. Sure, you can always save up for your second grade 3 turn, but that means giving up on your first Oversoul. Against some decks which thrive in the late game, you need to pump all your damage in as soon as possible. The next major issue is Ana. Without her, Yo loses about half of his potential power. What makes the deck function really well is the ability to threaten hits and gain benefits for being blocked. If she gets retired and you don't have anything in your hand, you won't be having a fun time. And while Faust can bring her back, he does require Counterblast. The deck isn't heavy on it, mind you, but being damage denied can really hurt you. Now that we've gone over the strengths and weaknesses, it's time to go over some basic deck choices. Our right deck will generally include the Yo Asakura cards. We only run one copy of Bind Together, as Spear the Sword is our main grade 3. For triggers, we've got something a bit more standard, but focused on having 4 draws. Since Yo is going to be having an extra critical most of the time, we can get away with only having 7 critical triggers. Though if you're the sort who wants a bit more power and defense, front triggers definitely work. But draws are generally the preferred option as you really need to dig through your deck. For our grade 1s, we have 4 Amidamaru and 4 of our Sentinel. These are the standard cards you have in every Yo deck. Not much more needs to be said here. As for our grade 2s, while Faust ratios can be tinkered with, Ana is a must at 4 copies due to how important she is. While Ryu can be interchangeable with another grade 2, if you do run him then that's 4 copies for consistency. He's just an overall good card. Lastly, we have our main grade 3 to push for game. I've already explained him in more detail before, so I'm just gonna skip that here. There's also a few alternative cards to play if you're not looking to run a few of them for whatever reason you want. Our first batch is 4 copies of Becoming the World's Top Comedian Choco, and 3 of Jaguar Mick. Both cards are a pair and are used to create one of the best grade 2 rushes in the game. Unlike Tokagero mentioned earlier, Choco gives a guaranteed superior call from deck. Furthermore, Mick possesses the only skill capable of seeing your opponent's cards. These two are a very popular choice to run if you aren't going to use Ryu. Next we have 2 to 4 copies of Let's Just Take It Easy Yo Asakura, a rear guard that can power itself with its own skill. While the use threatens an additional attack, this card trades that for consistent power. Furthermore, being the only unit capable of surviving an attack from your opponent also helps quite a bit. Then we have 2 copies of Kind Man Wooden Sword Ryu. While lacking offensive power, it makes up for it with its 15k shield. Due to the nature of this card, most players opt to keep it around 2. Generally something to play if you've got space in your deck remaining. Another alternative is to completely cut out Spear the Sword and run 4 copies of your right deck grade 3. The idea is that you gain more immediate access to Persona Ride and sacrifice a bit less power you'd get from Spear the Sword's Oversoul. Using a critical is also non-existent in this situation, as by the time you Persona Ride, you'll most likely be around 4 damage to gain another crit. Another card to run is 2 copies of the order card Tatagata. Because Amidamaru is a spirit and not a shaman, he can't be revived by Faust. As such, this order exists as a way to get him back, while also giving your Vanguard another 10,000 power. It's generally recommended to run this around 2, as having 4 would be pretty excessive, especially given the deck space. Now, to be frank, the deck isn't awful by any stretch of the imagination. For overdress standards, it's way better than some of the most egregious ones. There's a lot of fun to be had in having some super aggressive turns. It's just that in the context of the game today, plenty of decks have become much more powerful than compared to the crossover's first and second release. And most likely, you're gonna see tons of Chrono Jets at your locals. Even if not, there's still tons of great decks with a good amount of popularity. But that really shouldn't be a deterrent to not play it. At the end of the day, you should play what you enjoy most, and Shaman King can offer that with its numerous playstyles. It's especially true when tons of deck can win in D standard, which is one of its biggest appeals. Ultimately, I could recommend the Yo deck to any Rush enthusiast, doubly so for a fan of Shaman King. I do hope that you enjoyed this week's video. Let me know what you think of the new style I've been trying out. Have you played Shaman King in Vanguard before? If so, what's your favorite deck? If there's any other possible techs I've missed, be sure to comment down below. And as always, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I've got new videos coming every week, so be sure to be subbed to be known when they drop. It also helps the channel a lot too. Growth has been pretty great, and it's all thanks to you guys. Here's some more in the future. Thank you, and have yourselves a great week.